I know what you might be thinking. John, this thing is so small. What can you possibly fit into it? I mean, can you even fit all the hand tools that you use to build this thing into this thing? Let's find out. Okay, so I'm going to cut the dado in this area here. I'm going to use the fence of the table saw, so the distance from here to here is about 1.5 inches. Make this cut first, and I'm going to move the blade 1/8 of an inch, make the next cut, and then move the blade over 1/8 of an inch until I get pretty close to the last one, and I'm going to custom fit that to make sure that the vertical piece that sits in here is going to fit nice and tight. Alright, so this gives you a sense of what it's going to look like. Now, I accidentally cut these two grooves a little bit too loose, or a little bit looser than I like it, but it still works. This bottom side, this groove is nice and tight. So I got my bottom cut out here, and you can see it is just off by maybe a 1/16 of an inch. So I'm going to go ahead and plane one edge and get it so that it fits in between here nice and tight. The length here is pretty good. So figuring out the lid size can be a little bit tricky. Now I don't know how the traditional Japanese worker did it, but I'm going to show you how I do it. And it's fairly straightforward. I don't need to do any measurements. I'm just going to clamp this thing on. Position it where I think it should be, pretty close to where it should be. And then I'm going to take a piece that fits inside like this pretty good, but it's a bit too long. And then I'm going to butt it up against this end. And it's got to fall through here. Yep, that's going to work. There's about a little bit under 1/8 of an inch of a gap. Alright, so imagine these two pieces are attached to the lid, and the lid drops in like this, right, and then it gets pushed this way. So this side will meet, and the wedge here will prevent the lid from coming out. So on this side, there's a key that fits into this little pyramid or triangular shape that's created here. So in essence, this is sort of like a dovetail, and fits in like so. Here are all the pieces cut out. Here's the lid, the end pieces. So this is from recycled piece of board, so one face is already being used. I'm going to keep this face, but clean up the rest of the faces with my plane. I added this piece to keep everything nice and square while the glue is drying. Probably should have just made a piece to fill that hole up. Hey look, it's that same piece of scrap wood that's about 1/4 inch thick. I'm using the marking gauge to help me locate the horizontal positions for where I need to drill these 1/8 inch holes. All the horizontal holes follow Pascal's triangle. It is spaced 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 3, 3, 1, etc. And the vertical ones are just in groups of 3, except on the side with the drawer there is it's missing 2 of the pins. Looks like somebody listened to me. So one of the last things to fix is this drawer. It sits in a little bit further than it should, or than I like it to be. So what I'm going to do is add screws on the back wall here, so that when I close it, the screws will hit the other side of the box and it closes flush in about this position. If the finished handle looks weak to you, I'd have to agree. But check out the description for a link to a video where I tested the strength of this handle, or where I tested the design of this handle. Be careful when you're screwing. The MDF has a tendency to split between the two faces. So to start, I've marked the center of the wedge piece. That this is the side that does not have the lock on it. I'm also going to mark the center of this lid piece. When I'm gluing, I'm trying to keep these two lines nice and aligned. So I'm just going to eyeball that the bottom edge here and this edge are about 1/4 inch apart. And I'm going to use my square to make sure that these two pieces form a nice square shape. So that's about 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to clamp this guy behind it. And that way I can take this one off. And now I'm ready to glue the bottom, these two pieces together. So this thing must have shifted when I glued it, because there's a little bit of a gap between these two pieces, and there's no gap up here. Alright, so I was able to close this gap with the rebate plane. So once this piece is attached to the lid, the wedge or the lock piece is going to come in and slide in like this. And you can see this wedges everything together. So I'm just going to align this piece, and I'm going to draw a line behind it. So from this marked line, I'm going to move in about 1/16 of an inch. I'm just going to eyeball where that is, maybe a little bit more. So next I'm going to tilt this about another 1/16. So the distance from this mark to this edge, this mark to this edge is a 1/16, and from here, this mark to this edge is about 1/8. And I'm going to make another mark here. Before I glue this piece down, I decided to put 2 screws in here, and I think that will stop it from moving when I have the glue on the other side. Alright, so these two pieces create a taper going from wide to narrow, and the key piece here doesn't fit very far. So what I need to do is simply taper this side to fit the angle of this thing, which is about 1/8 of an inch over a span of 8 inches. Don't get too attached to the key piece. As the box is being used, that lid is probably going to loosen up, and that key is probably going to be too loose, and you probably have to make a new one. I think a project like this really invites to be touched, so it's important to knock off all the sharp edges so that when the hand runs over it, it's going to feel real good. Design and proportion are two very apparent phenotypes of any creation, and it is impossible for a man to get those two right, to get those two perfect, but it is fun to try. I think this side looks a lot better than this side. I almost forgot to install the feet.
Can you even fit all the hand tools that you use to build this thing into this thing?
Yes, with room to spare. I don't even think I used the Stanley No. 4 throughout this entire project. I just put it in there anyways. There was still room left.